My racist mother spread rumors about my daughter and falsely accused her of assault to get CPS involved and protect family image. Now she expects me to act like nothing happened. When my uncle was having a wedding, he told me I could bring a +1, and as per the invite, children were allowed. So the first thing I did was tell my daughter Isabella. She had never been to one but always loved watching the wedding scenes in Barbie movies, and that made her want to go. You see, I adopted her from the adoption center when she was just 8, and now she was 9, but still hadn't gotten the opportunity to see that many things for the first time. So when I told her about this, she had a huge smile on her face. "Thank you, Daddy, I'm so happy you adopted me," she yelled at the top of her lungs. I responded by telling her I'm not just her adoptive dad, I'm her father, and she is the most important person in my life. This made her smile even harder, and she ran into the living room to watch Barbie: A Fashion Fairy Tale and kept replaying the scene where Ken plans a huge wedding for Barbie. It was honestly so sweet it brought me to tears. Fast forward to the day of the wedding rehearsal. Isabella had a tendency to be on edge and always on the lookout for danger, so I told her that any loud sounds were safe and were simply part of the rehearsal, and that if she got scared, try not to make too much noise but just squeeze my hand so she knows everything is okay. It's all things we had practiced before, so I thought it would be okay. But we were halfway through the ceremony when Isabella squeezed my hand as tight as she could. I thought she was having a panic attack, but when I looked into her eyes I saw sparks, and I knew she was just really happy. We locked eyes and I nodded, as if to say I love you, which made her smile even harder. And I guess her eyes really were bright because that's when my uncle looked over and noticed her. "What the actual F is she doing here?" he yelled. "Who invite the cotton picker?" his ugly wife chimed in. You see, my entire family was white. Meanwhile, Isabella was African American. My heart shattered. I turned to Isabella, who wasn't smiling anymore, but wasn't crying either. "Why do you have to ruin everything?" My mom turned around to yell, staring straight at Isabella. I felt tears well up in my eyes, but the last thing I wanted was for them to know they had any power over us. So I lifted her up, handed her a lollipop from my pocket, and we walked out. "Baby, please don't listen to them." "I wasn't," Isabella exclaimed, smiling again. "I understand the kids at the orphanage were like this too, but they're just dumb, right? An adult at the orphanage told me only dumb people talk like that." Suddenly my heart was filled with more pride than I even thought possible. "Absolutely. They're idiots," I exclaimed, before twirling her around and driving to her favorite Dunkin' Donuts spot. That moment reminded me of what I already knew. My daughter was a gift to my life. Fast forward 3 days later to the actual wedding. My daughter insisted on me going without her, so I hired a babysitter to take her to the cinema for the day. For the first part of the ceremony, I let my family believe that they had gotten away with it, that I wasn't going to bring it up again. But then came the dinner. I didn't even bother announcing anything, just violently pushed my chair back and stood up, forcing everyone to pay attention. So we all had the pleasure of meeting my daughter Isabella. Everyone's faces suddenly turned to their plates, pretending to be extremely interested in the pattern on the sides. And well, let's face it guys, some of us acted in ways we weren't proud of. As I said this, I pointed directly at my uncle and my mom, but that's okay, because repairs have been made. I have donated $2,000 to the local adoption agency in the name of Murphy, my last name. One person began to slowly clap, followed by everyone cheering, except my uncle and my mom, that is. They looked so red I honestly thought they were going to turn into tomatoes, but still, they forced an ugly smile and continued eating. I had no idea that it was the silence before the chaos, because the next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls from both my family and numbers I didn't recognize. That's when I saw it. In the family group chat, my mother had put in a photo of what was very obviously a fake bruise on her knee. She claimed that Isabella had given it to her at the wedding rehearsal, after my mom requested that she blow her nose. Anger boiled my blood. Their story didn't even make any effing sense, but the entire family was eating it up. But once everything was said and done, I planned on making her pay. The messages came in rapid succession, a cascade of family members expressing shock and concern. "OMG, are you okay?" wrote an aunt. "I knew something was off about her," commented a cousin I barely knew. "This is what happens when you adopt without knowing the background," added my uncle's wife, her message dripping with smug satisfaction. Each notification made my stomach twist tighter, my jaw clench harder, as the family I'd grown up with revealed the depths of their prejudice. What struck me most was how eagerly they accepted this obvious lie, how willing they were to believe the worst about a child they barely knew. It spoke volumes about their character, and about the subtle and not so subtle racism that had apparently been lurking beneath the surface of our family dynamics all along. I wondered how I had missed it growing up, or if I had simply been trained to ignore it, to accept certain jokes and comments as normal when they were anything but. I stared at my phone, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to type out a furious response, calling out my mother's obvious lie, but I knew better. Responding in anger would just give her ammunition. Instead, I took screenshots of everything. The fake bruise photo, the timestamps, all the messages from family members expressing shock and concern. I saved them to a folder labeled Evidence. My hands were shaking with rage as I captured each message, each comment, each reaction. I was methodical, making sure to document everything in case I needed it later. The folder grew quickly as more family members chimed in, each message more outrageous than the last. One cousin suggested I should return Isabella like a defective product. Another wondered if she had violent tendencies because of her background. My uncle posted a link to an article about adoption disruption, the process of legally dissolving an adoption, with the comment, "Just saying." The casual cruelty displayed in that group chat was staggering. These were people who had known me my entire life, who had attended my graduations and birthday parties, who had sent cards when my father died. Now they were united in their willingness to believe the worst about my daughter, to suggest that I should abandon her, all based on an obviously fabricated story. The betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound I wasn't sure would ever fully heal. Isabella was still asleep in her room, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched clutched tightly in her arms. I was grateful she wasn't awake to see me shaking with rage. I needed to be smart about this. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a serious accusation against my daughter. I quietly opened her bedroom door, needing to reassure myself that she was safe and peaceful, untouched by the ugliness unfolding on my phone. Her room was bathed in the soft glow of her nightlight, a small elephant lamp that projected stars onto the ceiling. She lay curled on her side, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant I'd given her on our first Christmas together, the other tucked beneath her pillow. Her face in sleep was completely relaxed, all the watchfulness that sometimes shadowed her expression during waking hours temporarily erased. The contrast between her innocent slumber and the vicious accusations being made against her was jarring. How could anyone look at this child, this kind, thoughtful, sometimes anxious but unfailingly gentle child, and see violence? How could they fabricate such harmful lies about someone so vulnerable? The injustice of it made my chest ache with a physical pain, as if my heart was literally breaking for her. I scrolled through my contacts and found Eliana Santos, a lawyer I'd met through work last year. We weren't close friends, but she'd given me her card at a company party, saying to call if I ever needed legal advice. I never thought I'd actually use it. Eliana specialized in family law, her business card describing her as an advocate for children and families. I remembered our brief conversation at the holiday party, how she'd mentioned her passion for cases involving adoption and foster care, having been a foster child herself before being adopted as a teenager. Her card had been sitting in my wallet for months, one of those things you keep without expecting to need. Now I was profoundly grateful I hadn't thrown it away. Standing in my kitchen, waiting for the coffee maker to finish brewing, I dialed her number, not really expecting her to answer so early in the morning. The digital clock on the microwave showed 6:45 a.m., hardly business hours for a law office. But I needed to do something, to take some action rather than just stewing in my anger and hurt. She picked up on the third ring, her voice professional but warm. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice cracked a few times when describing the racist comments at the rehearsal. Eliana listened patiently, asking occasional clarifying questions, then told me she could fit me in for a consultation tomorrow morning at 9. I thanked her, feeling slightly more grounded after having taken a concrete step. The doorbell rang just as I was hanging up. Isabella's babysitter Jasmine was early, ready to take her to the park while I dealt with this mess. I quickly wiped my eyes and plastered on a smile. The last thing I wanted was for Isabella to know anything about this situation. Jasmine stood on our doorstep, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and a paper bag from the local bakery in her hand. At 19, she was studying early childhood education at the community college and had been babysitting Isabella for nearly 6 months now. The two had bonded immediately over a shared love of art projects and nature documentaries. Jasmine's calm, steady presence had been a blessing, providing Isabella with another trusted adult in her life, something the therapist had recommended as important for building her sense of security. I brought muffins, Jasmine said with a smile, holding up the bag. Blueberry, Isabella's favorite. The thoughtful gesture nearly broke my composure, this small kindness contrasting sharply with the cruelty I'd been reading all morning. I invited her in, explaining in vague terms that I had some unexpected work issues to deal with and appreciated her flexibility in coming early. Isabella came bounding down the hallway in her favorite yellow pajamas, her hair wrapped in a colorful scarf. "Daddy, Jasmine's here. Can we get ice cream at the park?" she asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. I knelt down to her level, straightening the collar of her pajama top. "Of course, sweetheart. And maybe you can show Jasmine your cartwheel?" This made her beam with pride. She'd been practicing cartwheels all week. The yellow pajamas were slightly too big, the sleeves covering her hands until she pushed them up, a habit that always made me smile. The colorful scarf wrapped around her head was one we'd picked up at a cultural festival last month, after Isabella had expressed interest in learning more about her heritage. She'd been practicing different ways to tie it, watching YouTube tutorials with intense concentration. This morning's style was particularly successful, the vibrant patterns framing her face beautifully. Her excitement about showing Jasmine her cartwheel progress was infectious. She'd been working on it diligently in our small living room, clearing the coffee table out of the way to create enough space. Just yesterday, she'd managed to get her feet all the way over without falling, a milestone that had been celebrated with high fives and her favorite apple juice. After they left, I spent the morning researching defamation laws and gathering more evidence. I found photos from the rehearsal that clearly showed Isabella sitting beside me the entire time, never interacting with my mother. I also dug up text messages from before the wedding, where my mother had expressed displeasure about Isabella's attendance, writing that she didn't understand why I had to bring that child to a family event. These would help establish her prejudice and motive for lying. The research was both distressing and empowering. I learned about defamation per se, false statements so inherently harmful they don't require proof of damages, and how accusations of criminal behavior, like assault, fell into this category. I discovered that while proving defamation could be challenging, having clear evidence of deliberate falsehoods strengthened a case considerably. Each article I read, each legal definition I highlighted, gave me a sense that there were tools available to fight back against what was happening. The text messages from my mother were particularly damning. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, she had sent several messages expressing her displeasure about Isabella's attendance. "Do you really need to bring her?" she'd written 3 weeks before the event. "It's a family occasion," she'd added 2 days later, the implication that Isabella wasn't family hanging unspoken, but clear in her words. The most recent message, sent just days before the rehearsal, had been even more explicit. "I don't understand why you had to bring that child to a family event. People will be uncomfortable." These messages, combined with the photos showing Isabella's location throughout the rehearsal, created an undeniable timeline that contradicted my mother's fabricated story. The evidence was mounting, piece by piece, creating a foundation for whatever action I might might need to take next. The next morning, I dropped Isabella off at her friend Zoe's house for a playdate. Zoe's mom, Sharon, was one of the few people who knew the full story of what happened at the rehearsal. She squeezed my arm and whispered that Isabella was always welcome at their house, no matter what. She's a beautiful soul, Sharon added, watching as the girls ran off to play. Anyone who can't see that has something wrong with them, not her. Sharon had been a godsend since we moved into the neighborhood last year. A single mother herself, she understood the challenges I faced and had become a valuable friend and ally. Her daughter Zoe, a bright, energetic 9-year-old with glasses and a passion for science, had immediately bonded with Isabella over their shared love of drawing and animals. The girls had become inseparable, spending weekends at each other's homes and sitting together at lunch and school. Sharon's home was a cozy split level with a fenced backyard perfect for the girls to play in. As I watched from the doorway, Isabella and Zoe were already deep in conversation, heads bent together over what looked like a collection of rocks and leaves they were sorting into piles. Isabella's face was animated as she explained something to her friend, her hands gesturing expressively, all traces of the cautious, watchful child. She could sometimes be completely absent in the comfort of this safe friendship. Eliana's office was in a small building downtown, with a modest waiting room decorated with local artwork. She greeted me with a firm handshake and got straight to business. I showed her the screenshots and explained everything that had happened, from the initial raxed outburst to the false accusation. "This is serious," she said, frowning at the photos on her tablet. "False accusations like this could potentially escalate. Have you responded to any of these messages?" Her office was neat and professional, with diplomas and certifications hanging on one wall and a bookshelf filled with legal texts on another. A large window overlooked a small courtyard, where a fountain bubbled peacefully, the sound just audible through the glass. Eliana herself was younger than I'd remembered from our brief meeting, probably in her early 30s, but her demeanor was confident and focused as she reviewed the evidence I'd brought. She scrolled through the screenshots methodically, occasionally making notes on a legal pad beside her. Her frown deepened as she read some of the more vicious comments from my family members, and she paused particularly long on the photo of my mother's alleged bruise, studying it with a critical eye. I shook my head, explaining that I wanted legal advice first. "Good, don't. At least not yet." She recommended I document everything, install security cameras at home, and record any future interactions with my family. She also suggested I write down exactly what happened at the rehearsal while it was still fresh in my memory. The security cameras were installed that same afternoon, discrete devices at my front and back doors that connected to an app on my phone. The technician explained how the motion detection worked and showed me how to access the footage remotely. "Better safe than sorry," he said as he packed up his tools, having no idea how relevant his words were to my situation. That evening, after Isabella was in bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down every detail I could remember about the rehearsal, the exact words that were said, the positions of everyone in the room, the timing of events. I recorded it all as precisely as possible, knowing that specific details would be more credible than general recollections. The process was painful, forcing me to relive one of the worst moments of my life, but also cathartic in a way, transferring the toxic memories from my mind onto paper, where they seemed slightly less overwhelming. "And one more thing," she added as I was leaving, her expression grave. "Be prepared for this to escalate. People who make false accusations rarely back down easily." Her words proved prophetic. 2 days later, I got a call from HR at my company. Someone had made an anonymous tip claiming I had been violent toward Isabella. My stomach dropped as Marissa, the HR director, explained that they had to open a mandatory investigation. I was being placed on temporary leave. The call came while I was at my desk, working on a design project with a looming deadline. Marissa's voice was professional but strained as she asked me to come to her office immediately. The walk down the hallway felt surreal, colleagues glancing up from their computers as I passed, unaware of the bomb that was about to drop on my professional life. Marissa's office was on the top floor, with glass walls that offered a view of the city skyline but little privacy. As soon as I entered, she asked me to close the door and take a seat. Her face was a careful mask of neutrality, but I could see tension in the set of her shoulders, the way her hands were clasped too tightly on the desk in front of her. "We've received a concerning report," she began, her voice measured. "An anonymous caller has alleged that you've been physically abusive toward your daughter." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. "As you know, we take such allegations extremely seriously. Company policy requires us to place you on administrative leave while we investigate." I knew immediately who was behind this. My mother had taken things to a whole new level, trying to destroy not just my relationship with the family but my career too. I explained the situation to Marissa as calmly as I could, showing her the screenshots of my mother's false accusation. She looked sympathetic but said the investigation still had to proceed according to company policy. Marissa's expression softened slightly as she looked at the evidence on my phone, the obviously fake bruise, the contradictory timeline, the raxed comments that had preceded the accusation. She was a mother herself, with photos of her 2 teenagers prominently displayed on her desk, and I could see her professional detachment wavering as she began to understand the full picture. "I'm sorry, but my hands are tied," she said finally, sliding a folder across the desk toward me. "Here's the paperwork explaining the terms of your leave. It's paid, and your benefits will continue. The investigation should be completed within 2 weeks." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "For what it's worth, I've seen your daughter at the company picnic. She adores you. Anyone with eyes can see that." That night, after Isabella was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and cried for the first time since this all started. I felt so alone, cut off from the family I'd grown up with, my job in jeopardy, all because I dared to love a child who didn't share my skin color. The kitchen was dark except for the small light above the stove, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, a gentle soundtrack to my my breakdown. The tears came suddenly and violently, sobs that shook my entire body as I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what was happening. I cried for the family I had lost, for the innocence that had been stolen from Isabella, for the ugliness that had been revealed in people I had loved and trusted. On the refrigerator, held by colorful magnets, were Isabella's drawings, bright, hopeful creations showing our little family in various settings. One depicted us at the park, stick figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. Another showed our apartment building with both of us waving from a window. A third, newer drawing showed Isabella in what appeared to be a wedding dress, with me standing proudly beside her. These visual reminders of her love and trust made my tears flow even harder, a mixture of gratitude for her presence in my life and fear that someone might try to take her away. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, it's Megan, your cousin. I'm so sorry about everything. Mom made me call CPS, said it was our duty to report child abuse. I didn't want to, but she wouldn't stop. I'm really sorry." My blood ran cold. CPS, Child Protective Services. This was getting worse by the minute. Megan was my aunt's daughter, a quiet, bookish woman in her mid-20s who still lived at home. We had never been particularly close, but I remembered her as someone who generally tried to avoid family conflicts, preferring to disappear into the background when tensions rose. The fact that she had reached out, risking her mother's anger to warn me, suggested she felt genuine remorse about what was happening. The text glowed on my phone screen, the words "Call CPS" jumping out as if they were written in neon. Child Protective Services, the agency with the power to remove children from homes where abuse is suspected. The agency that, despite its noble mission, sometimes made devastating mistakes. The agency that would now be scrutinizing my parenting, my home, my relationship with Isabella, all because of a vindictive lie. I called Eliana immediately despite the late hour. She answered, sounding groggy, but snapped to attention when I told her about CPS. "Clean your house. Make sure everything is perfect. Have Isabella's medical records ready. School records too. Anything that shows you're a good parent." Her voice was calm but urgent as she gave me a detailed list of preparations. "Make sure you have enough food in the refrigerator. Check that all smoke detectors are working. Remove any prescription medications from accessible areas. Have a copy of your adoption paperwork ready. And most importantly, don't panic in front of Isabella. Children pick up on our anxiety." I barely slept that night, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The next day, I cleaned the house from top to bottom while Isabella was at school, scrubbing floors and organizing closets until everything gleamed. I gathered her medical records, school reports, and even printed photos of us together at various events and outings, creating a portfolio of our life together. The cleaning was almost therapeutic, giving me a physical outlet for my anxiety. I scrubbed the bathroom tiles until my fingers were raw, organized Isabella's closet by color and season, wiped down every surface in the kitchen until they shone. I checked every smoke detector, replaced the batteries in the carbon monoxide alarm, and made sure all the locks on windows and doors were functioning properly. The physical labor left me exhausted but slightly calmer, giving me a sense that I was doing something productive in a situation where so much was beyond my control. The portfolio I created was comprehensive, a visual and documentary history of our life together. I included Isabella's most recent report card, showing her excellent grades and her teacher's comments about her being a joy to have in class. I added her health records, documenting her regular checkups and the steady improvement in her growth chart since she'd come to live with me. I printed emails from her art teacher praising her creativity, notes from playdates showing her social connections, and photos from holidays and everyday moments that captured our bond. Looking at the completed folder, I felt a surge of pride in the life we had built together, alongside a fierce determination to protect it. CPS showed up the following day, a Wednesday afternoon. The caseworker, a tired-looking man named Richard with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, explained they had received a report and needed to check on Isabella's welfare. I invited him in, trying to appear calm and cooperative despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Richard stood on our doorstep, clipboard in hand, his expression professional but not unkind. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and khaki pants that had seen better days, his ID badge hanging from a lanyard around his neck. Despite his rumpled appearance, there was a sharpness to his gaze as he introduced himself and explained the purpose of his visit. "We've received a report of concern regarding your daughter Isabella," he said, his voice matter-of-fact but not accusatory. "I need to conduct a home assessment and speak with both of you. This is standard procedure when we receive such reports." He didn't specify what the concern was or who had reported it, but I knew. The knowledge sat like a stone in my stomach as I stepped aside to let him enter. Our apartment, thankfully, was spotless after my cleaning frenzy. The living room was tidy, with Isabella's books arranged neatly on the shelves and her art supplies organized in colorful bins. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the photographs of Isabella and me that decorated the walls, a visual timeline of our growing relationship over the past year. Richard interviewed me first, asking about Isabella's routine, her schooling, her health, and our relationship. I answered honestly, showing him photos and records when relevant. Then he asked to speak with Isabella alone. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. I sat on the couch, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white, straining to hear their muffled voices from her bedroom. The silence in the living room was oppressive, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall and the occasional distant sound of traffic from the street below. I tried to focus on breathing evenly, on projecting an image of calm confidence, but inside I was terrified. What if Isabella said something that was misinterpreted? What if she mentioned the wedding rehearsal incident and it somehow got twisted around? What if Richard was biased against single adoptive fathers? The questions multiplied in my mind, each more anxiety-inducing than the last. I thought about Isabella in there, being questioned by a stranger about her home life. She was perceptive and articulate for her age, but she was still just a child with a history of trauma that made her sometimes wary of new adults. Would she be frightened? Would she understand what was happening? Would she think she had done something wrong? The thought of her feeling scared or confused made my heart ache. Finally, they emerged from Isabella's room. She was smiling, holding a drawing she'd made of our family, just the two of us, standing in front of our apartment building with a bright sun overhead. Richard's face was neutral, but he seemed less tense than when he arrived. Isabella tells me she's very happy here, he said, glancing down at his notes. She says you're the best daddy in the world and that you make her favorite pancakes on Sundays. Isabella bounced over to me, proudly displaying her drawing. It showed two stick figures, one tall with short brown hair, one smaller with black curly hair, holding hands in front of a rectangular building. The son in the corner had a smiling face, and she had written, "Me and Daddy," in careful letters across the top. Her expression was open and relaxed, showing no signs of the stress I had feared the interview might cause her. I smiled weakly, relief washing over me. Chocolate chip with whipped cream faces. Richard nodded, making a final note in his file. Everything seems to be in order, Mr. Murphy. We'll be following up, but I don't see any immediate concerns. Richard's pen moved quickly across his form, checking boxes and adding brief notes. His expression remained professional, but there was a softening around his eyes as he looked up from his clipboard. Based on my assessment, there's no evidence to support the allegations made in the report. Isabella appears well-adjusted, healthy, and securely attached to you. Your home is safe and appropriate. He paused, then added in a slightly lower voice, "Unfortunately, we sometimes receive reports that are, let's say, motivated by factors other than genuine concern for a child's welfare." After he left, I hugged Isabella so tight she squealed in protest. "Daddy, you're squishing me." "Sorry, baby. I just love you so much." "I know," she said, patting my cheek with her small hand. I told that man I'm happier than I've ever been. Because it's true. The relief that flooded through me was so intense it made my knees weak. I knelt down to Isabella's level, taking in every detail of her face, the slight gap between her front teeth, the constellation of freckles across her nose, the warm brown eyes that looked at me with such trust and affection. She was here, she was safe, and for now at least no one could take her away from me. Isabella seemed unfazed by the visit, treating it as just another interesting event in her day. "That man asked me lots of questions about you," she said as she settled at the kitchen table with her crayons. "I told him you're not perfect because sometimes you burn the toast, but you're the best daddy anyway." Her matter-of-fact assessment made me laugh despite the stress of the situation, reminding me once again of her remarkable resilience and wisdom. The CPS visit was over, but the nightmare continued. Over the next 2 weeks, a smear campaign unfolded on social media. Old family friends started unfriending me on Facebook. Posts appeared suggesting I was using a child for attention and that I had coached Isabella to fake innocence. My mother had apparently been busy, spreading her poison to anyone who would listen. The social media attacks were particularly painful because they extended beyond my immediate family to people I had considered friends, former high school classmates, parents of childhood friends, colleagues from previous jobs. People who should have known me well enough to question such outlandish accusations were instead accepting them at face value and distancing themselves from me publicly. One morning, I opened Facebook to find that my cousin's wife had posted a vague but clearly targeted status. "So sad when people use children as props for their own ego. Praying for the child." The post had dozens of likes and supportive comments, including several from extended family members. Another day, I discovered I'd been removed from a neighborhood parents group without explanation, only to learn later that someone had suggested I wasn't a safe person to have in a group with children. The isolation was creeping into real life as well. Parents at Isabella's school, who had previously been friendly, began avoiding eye contact at drop-off. Invitations to birthday parties and play dates dwindled. One mother actually crossed the street with her child to avoid walking past us on the sidewalk. Each small rejection was like a paper cut, minor on its own, but increasingly painful as they accumulated. I messaged one of my mom's friends, Ashley, who I'd known since childhood. Her response was chilling. "Sorry, but your mom said the girl had a violent episode. I have to protect my kids." The final straw came when I discovered my mother had created a private Facebook group called Support for the Murphy Family, where she was sharing updates about the situation. All lies painting Isabella as troubled and me as delusional. She'd even posted a photo of Isabella from the family Christmas party, circling her hand in red and claiming she was about to hit someone. It was actually a photo of Isabella reaching for a cookie. The Facebook group was the most disturbing development yet. A mutual friend who had been added to it sent me screenshots concerned about what was being said. The group had over 40 members, mostly family and close friends of my mother, and served as an echo chamber for her increasingly bizarre narratives about Isabella and me. In addition to the doctored photo of Isabella about to hit someone, my mother had shared fabricated stories about Isabella's behavior at school, completely contradicting her actual excellent school reports, invented concerns, supposedly expressed by neighbors, and even suggested that Isabella's biological family had a history of violence, information she couldn't possibly have, as those records were sealed. The comments on these posts were a mixture of performative sympathy, "So sad, praying for you all," uninformed advice, "He needs to get that child into intensive therapy before someone gets seriously hurt," and outright racism thinly veiled as concern. Sometimes these children from certain backgrounds just can't adjust to normal family life, no matter how hard you try. I drove to my mother's house, anger and hurt fueling me. When she opened the door, her face hardened at the sight of me standing on her porch. Before I could say a word, she slammed it shut. An hour later, she texted me, "I hope you get help for whatever made you think adopting a kid out of pity was a good idea. Some children are just too damaged to save. I'm saying this because I care about you." My mother's house was the same one I'd grown up in, a neat colonial in a quiet suburb with carefully tended flower beds and a porch swing where I'd spent countless summer evenings as a teenager. Standing on that familiar porch, now being treated like an unwelcome stranger, created created a surreal disconnect between my past and present. The door that had always been open to me throughout my life was now literally slammed in my face, a physical manifestation of the rejection I was experiencing. Her text message came as I was driving home, the notification sound interrupting the playlist of children's songs I kept in the car for Isabella. I pulled into a gas station to read it, and the words hit me like a physical blow. Adopting a kid out of pity, as if my love for Isabella was some kind of charitable act rather than the most natural feeling in the world. Too damaged to save, as if my brilliant, resilient daughter was somehow broken beyond repair. Because I care about you. Perhaps the most hurtful part, this false claim of concern that masked what was clearly hatred and prejudice. I didn't respond. Instead, I went home and started a blog. I kept it unlisted, not searchable, and wrote detailed accounts of everything that had happened, keeping names anonymous but with enough details that family members would know who was who. I included timestamps, descriptions of events, and my feelings throughout the ordeal. I sent the link only to a few trusted family members and friends. The blog became a form of therapy, a way to process the ongoing trauma while creating a contemporaneous record of events. I wrote late at night after Isabella was asleep, pouring my thoughts and feelings onto the digital page in raw, honest posts. I described the wedding rehearsal incident in detail, the false accusations that followed, the CPS visit, the social media campaign, everything documented with dates, times, and specific quotes when possible. I wrote about Isabella too, her resilience in the face of rejection, her continuing academic success despite the stress at home, her kindness toward others, even as she experienced cruelty. I shared the small moments that illustrated her character, how she saved half her allowance each week to donate to the animal shelter, how she made get-well cards for classmates who were absent from school, how she always insisted on setting an extra place at the table on holidays in case someone doesn't have a family to eat with. Writing the blog was cathartic, transforming my helpless anger into something productive. Each post felt like reclaiming a small piece of the narrative that had been stolen from us, setting the record straight, even if only for a limited audience. I was careful to password protect it and only share the link with people I truly trusted. My friend Sharon, a few cousins who had reached out supportively, Isabella's therapist with her permission, and Eliana, my lawyer. Within days, people started reaching out privately. My cousin River admitted they'd been uncomfortable with how my mother was acting but hadn't known what to do. An aunt I rarely spoke with called to say she believed me and was disgusted by the whole situation. The tide was slowly turning as people began to see through my mother's lies. River's message came first, a long email expressing regret for not speaking up sooner. I saw how they treated Isabella at the rehearsal, they wrote, and I was shocked, but I didn't say anything. I've been feeling guilty ever since. Your blog helped me understand how serious this has become, and I want you to know I'm on your side. River offered to make a formal statement about what they had witnessed if it would help. My Aunt Margaret, my father's sister who had distanced herself from the family years ago, called the day after I shared the blog with her. I always knew your mother had issues, she said bluntly, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. That child of yours sounds wonderful and what they're doing is unforgivable. She promised to reach out to other family members who might be receptive to hearing the truth, but I needed more concrete evidence. I contacted the wedding venue and asked if they had security footage from the rehearsal day. The manager was sympathetic when I explained the situation and agreed to check their archives. 3 days later, I received an email with a video attachment. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show the rehearsal from multiple angles. And there was my mother, sitting in her seat the entire time, never once interacting with Isabella. The lie about the bruise was definitively disproven. The venue manager, a woman named Diane with decades of experience in the wedding industry, had been immediately helpful when I explained my situation. Unfortunately, I've seen family drama unfold at weddings more times than I can count, she said with a sigh when I visited her office to make my request. But using a child as a weapon in family conflicts, that's a new low. The security footage came from multiple cameras positioned around the venue. Standard practice, Diane explained, for both security and liability purposes. The email she sent contained 4 video files, each showing the rehearsal from different angles. I spent hours reviewing them, my heart racing as I confirmed what I already knew to be true. Isabella had remained beside me throughout the entire event, never approaching my mother or any other family member until the moment we left following my uncle's outburst. The most damning clip showed my mother clearly visible in the front row, seated between 2 other relatives during the exact time frame when she later claimed Isabella had kicked her. She remained in that seat continuously, engaged in conversation with those around her, never showing any sign of discomfort or injury. It was irrefutable evidence of her lie. Armed with this evidence, I waited for the right moment to use it. It came sooner than expected. My cousin Dennis was hosting a casual family barbecue the following Sunday. He hadn't been at the wedding and wasn't fully aware of the drama. I decided to go, bringing the video with me on a USB drive. Dennis's backyard was spacious and well-maintained, with a large deck where he had set up his impressive grill and several tables covered in red and white checkered cloths. Children played on a swing set in the corner of the yard, their laughter creating a cheerful soundtrack that contrasted sharply with the tension I felt as I walked through the gate. The smell of burgers and hot dogs filled the air, along with the buzz of conversation that noticeably dimmed as people noticed my arrival. I had deliberately come alone, arranging for Isabella to spend the day with Sharon and Zoe at a children's museum in the next town over. I didn't want to subject her to potential hostility, and I needed to be able to focus entirely on what I planned to do without worrying about protecting her feelings. The tension was thick when I arrived alone. My mother avoided eye contact, huddling with my uncle and his wife in a corner of the yard. I mingled politely, accepting a burger from Dennis and making small talk with relatives who seemed unsure how to act around me. During dinner, when everyone was seated on the patio, I connected my phone to Dennis's TV. Without Without announcing anything, I played the rehearsal footage. The large outdoor TV had been set up to show a baseball game, the volume low as it served as background entertainment for the gathering. When I approached Dennis and quietly asked if I could use it for a moment, he looked surprised, but nodded, handing me the remote. Sure, man, whatever you need. He had always been one of the more easygoing members of the family, preferring to stay neutral in conflicts. The screen flickered as I connected my phone and pulled up the video files. The baseball game disappeared, replaced by the black and white security footage of the wedding venue. It took a moment for people to realize what they were watching, conversations continuing as they glanced occasionally at the screen with mild curiosity. Then recognition dawned as they identified the setting and the people visible in the footage. Conversations died as people realized what they were watching. When it reached the part showing my mother seated the entire time, never approaching Isabella, gasps filled the air. My mother jumped up, yelling for someone to turn it off, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The timestamp in the corner of the video was clearly visible, showing the exact time period when my mother had claimed the incident occurred. There she was, unmistakably seated in the front row, engaged in conversation with the person next to her, never interacting with Isabella, who was visible in another camera angle, sitting quietly beside me several rows back. The evidence was undeniable, the lie exposed for everyone to see. My mother's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She shot to her feet, nearly knocking over her chair, her face contorting with rage and panic. "Turn that off," she shrieked, looking wildly around for the remote control. That's been edited. That's not what happened." Her voice rose to a near hysterical pitch as she realized she was being publicly exposed. My uncle quickly moved to her side, attempting to block the view of the screen with his body while glaring at me with undisguised hatred. His wife began gathering her things, muttering about making a scene and ruining another family event. But most of the other relatives remained seated, their eyes moving between the irrefutable evidence on the screen and my mother's increasingly desperate denials. I paused the video and looked directly at her. "If you try anything else, anything at all, I'll make my blog public, with names, with this video, with everything." The barbecue ended shortly after, with people making awkward excuses to leave. I drove home feeling drained but somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The silence in my car was profound after the chaos of the confrontation. My hands shook slightly on the steering wheel, adrenaline still coursing through my system, but my mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. I had finally taken control of the narrative, had shown the truth in a way that couldn't be denied or twisted. Whatever happened next, I had broken the power of my mother's lies. That night, my cousin Megan forwarded me screenshots from a private family group chat I'd been excluded from. My mother was begging everyone to do damage control. My uncle was trying to shift blame to his wife, but the responses were lukewarm at best, with several family members pointing out that the video evidence was irrefutable. The screenshots revealed the rapid unraveling of my mother's carefully constructed narrative. "We all saw the video," wrote one aunt. "There's no denying what it showed." Another cousin commented, "I think we need to face facts here. A false accusation was made against a child. That's not something we should be trying to cover up." My uncle's attempts to blame his wife were met with skepticism. "You were both there? You both said terrible things. Own it." Most telling was the absence of the enthusiastic support that had characterized the earlier group chats, where before there had been dozens of sympathetic responses and offers to help spread the truth about Isabella. Now there was a noticeable cooling. Many family members weren't responding at all, their silence speaking volumes about their changing perspective on the situation. Over the next month, the family splintered. Some stopped speaking to me entirely, including my mother and uncle. Others reached out with awkward apologies, claiming they'd been misled or didn't have all the facts. My job cleared me completely after their investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing and invited me back with full pay for the time I'd missed. The apologies came in various forms: tentative text messages, cards in the mail, a few brave souls calling directly to express their regret. Most followed a similar pattern. "I should have known better. I'm sorry I didn't ask for your side. I feel terrible about what happened." Some were genuine, others seemed more concerned with absolving themselves of guilt than with acknowledging the harm done to Isabella and me. I accepted them all politely, but kept most of these relatives at a distance, unwilling to fully trust people who had been so quick to believe the worst. My return to work was marked by an awkward all-staff email from HR announcing that the matter had been resolved, and I was returning with the company's full confidence. My colleagues were kind but clearly curious, offering supportive smiles and welcome-back coffees while carefully avoiding direct questions about my absence. My boss simply said, "Glad to have you back. Your desk is exactly as you left it," before briefing me on the projects that had progressed during my leave. I declined. I'd been doing freelance graphic design work during my leave and found I enjoyed the flexibility it gave me to be there for Isabella. She was thriving despite everything, her natural resilience shining through. She'd started ballet classes at a local studio and spent hours drawing wedding dresses in her notebook, adding splashes of color and glitter to each design. "For when I get married," she explained one evening as we sat at the kitchen table, her colored pencils spread out around her. "But mine will be purple." The decision to leave my corporate job wasn't easy. It meant a less stable income and the loss of benefits like health insurance and retirement contributions. But the weeks of freelancing had shown me that I could make it work financially, and the benefits to our family life were undeniable. Being able to pick Isabella up from school every day, to be home when she needed me, to avoid the stress of commuting and office politics, these things had created a noticeable improvement in both our lives. Isabella's ballet classes had been another positive development. The studio was a small, family-owned business with a diverse group of students and a warm, supportive atmosphere. The instructor, Miss Layla, had a special gift for working with children, combining discipline with encouragement in a way that helped Isabella build confidence along with dance dance skills. Twice a week, I would sit with the other parents on folding chairs along the wall, watching through the large windows as Isabella learned positions and movements, her face a study in concentration. Her wedding dress designs had become increasingly elaborate, filling a special sketchbook I'd bought just for this purpose. She experimented with different silhouettes, ball gowns, mermaids, A-lines, and added detailed embellishments like beading, lace, and embroidery. This one has pockets, she would explain, pointing to a particularly practical design, and this one has stars all over the train. Her fascination with weddings hadn't been diminished by our negative experience. If anything, it seemed to have inspired her to reimagine what a wedding could be, something joyful, inclusive, and colorful. The final chapter came unexpectedly. A local newspaper ran a feature on single parents making a difference in the community. Someone, I never found out who, had nominated me. The article focused on my dedication to Isabella and my freelance work designing logos for local businesses. It mentioned nothing about the family drama, instead highlighting our volunteer work at the animal shelter and Isabella's recent performance in her school play. The reporter spent an afternoon with us, observing our routine and asking questions about the challenges and rewards of single parenthood. She watched as Isabella and I prepared dinner together, a simple pasta dish that Isabella helped season and stir, and took notes as we described our Saturday morning tradition of volunteering at the local animal shelter, where Isabella read storybooks to the cats waiting for adoption. The resulting article was a beautiful piece about found family and the different shapes love can take. It included a photo of Isabella and me at her school play, both of us beaming with pride. Her in her costume as the sun in a production about the solar system, me kneeling beside her with an arm around her shoulders. The caption noted that I had adopted Isabella the previous year and quoted her teacher describing the positive changes seen in her since she had found her forever home. The piece went viral in our small town, shared hundreds of times on social media. Several family members saw it, including my mother. Her final text to me read, "You really had to make it public, huh?" I blocked her number without responding, finally ready to close that chapter of our lives. Then I drove to pick up Isabella from ballet. The newspaper article created an unexpected wave of support from the community. Parents at Isabella's school who had been influenced by the rumors now approached me with friendly conversation at drop-off. Local business owners offered me freelance projects, impressed by the work featured in the article. Even our mail carrier mentioned it, saying his wife had been moved to tears by our story. My mother's text, her last communication before I blocked her, revealed how thoroughly she had missed the point. She saw the article as some kind of deliberate public relations move on my part, a continuation of the conflict she had created, rather than what it actually was, a celebration of family in all its diverse forms. Her inability to recognize the beauty in our relationship, to see beyond her own prejudice to the love that was so obvious to everyone else, confirmed that cutting ties was the right decision. She ran into my arms in her little pink tutu, eyes bright with the same excitement I'd seen at the wedding rehearsal before everything fell apart. "Daddy, look, I danced the wedding dance today," she exclaimed, demonstrating a twirl that made her tutu flutter. I lifted her up, twirling her around as she giggled, her joy infectious and pure. The ballet studio was warm and bright, smelling faintly of wood polish, and the vanilla-scented air freshener Miss Layla used. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the large windows, creating golden rectangles on the polished floor where Isabella now performed her wedding dance, a series of graceful turns and small jumps that she executed with intense concentration, her face serious until the final pose when she broke into a radiant smile. Other parents gathered their children, collecting small dance bags and water bottles, exchanging pleasantries about upcoming recitals and weekend plans. The normalcy of the scene struck me forcefully. This was our life now, these everyday moments of pride and joy, far removed from the toxicity we had left behind. Isabella's happiness, so evident in her flushed cheeks and sparkling eyes, was all the validation I needed that we were on the right path. In that moment, I knew we were going to be okay, that we had everything we needed in each other. "See?" I said, kissing her forehead as I set her back down on the sidewalk. "You didn't ruin anything. You made everything better." And as we walked hand in hand to the car, I realized that sometimes family isn't about blood or shared history. Sometimes it's about who stays by your side when others walk away, who sees your true worth when others are blinded by prejudice. Isabella had taught me that, and it was the most valuable lesson I'd ever learned. The sidewalk was dappled with late afternoon shadows, the trees along the street beginning to show the first hints of autumn color. Isabella skipped beside me, her ballet slippers tucked into her small pink backpack, her hand warm and trusting in mine. Ahead of us lay our car, and beyond that, our apartment, modest spaces that had become, through love and shared experience, the most precious places in the world to me. The journey we had traveled together, from that first meeting at the adoption center to this moment of simple, perfect connection, had been more challenging than I could have imagined. We had faced rejection, prejudice, and deliberate cruelty. We had lost people we thought would always be part of our lives. But we had also discovered strength we didn't know we possessed, built new relationships based on genuine acceptance, and created a family defined not by biology, but by choice. As Isabella chatted about her dance class, planning what color tutu she might want next, and wondering if Miss Layla would let her be in the front row for the winter recital, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead would have its own challenges, raising a child always does, but I knew with absolute certainty that whatever came our way, we would face it together, our bond only strengthened by the storms we had already weathered. And that, I realized, was the true meaning of family.